Let's start with the midterms. If they were held today, who do you think would win the House?
I think if they were held today, we'd have a tough time holding the House. I really do. I think it could be north of 25, maybe 30 seats, maybe north of that. There's people who are projecting today it could be 45 or 50 seats. I believe by November 6th, we're going to win this. I think all this takes is people on our side of the football focusing on what has to happen. This is an up or down vote on President Trump. You know, this election is going to come as a referendum on him. He permeates the entire political culture. And I think those that are around him are telling him that, hey, it's okay to lose the House. You can work with the Democrats and you can run against a Democratic House in 2020. It's bad advice. We have a C4 now, and I've actually made a film that's very much focused on getting out the Trump base, the deplorables plus the blue-collar Democrats. I think the opposition party media and the Democrats did succeed in one thing. I think they did get a do-over to 2016, and I think this is his first re-election.
You have a new group. Is that because you think Republicans are on pace to lose and they need your help?
I think, look, our group is principally to do the undergirding of President Trump's populism and economic nationalism message. We're trying to have one site that kind of provides information. We also think we can augment and help grassroots groups. I mean, the RNC's got what they do, the super PAC for President Trump, what they do, the campaign. We're totally independent. And what we're trying to do is idea generation, messaging around that, and then kind of action, helping to coordinate grassroots. You know, I'm a big believer, as people on the Democratic left are, that grassroots are really where the power is. And so that's what we're trying to focus on.
You said you are going to save the Trump presidency in these midterms. Does he know that he needs you to save him?
Well, I don't think the quote was we're going to save him. What we're trying to do is actually get this message focused. The message is about President Trump. It's about a referendum on President Trump. To me, it's an up or down vote. I think the Democrats, and particularly the grassroots Democrats, are running as an impeachment campaign. I think our side has to understand that. You just can't run on tax cuts. You have to run on the entire package of the Trump presidency.
You think impeachment's on the ballot in November? Why?
Absolutely. Because, number one, Tom Steyer and the grassroots of the Democratic Party have put it on the ballot, and so has Nancy Pelosi. Right now, Ari, when they say they're not talking about impeachment, it's because they've looked at the crosstabs in the polling. And they understand when we put impeachment on the ballot that it is a way to get all of the deplorables out. Even if the congressman in your district is a rhino, that you have to come out to support President Trump. Look, people on the Democratic left, you saw Grassroots, Netroots Nation a couple weeks ago. There are people in these districts in July in 90-degree heat going door to door. The reason they're going door to door is they're talking about the impeachment of President Trump. And so all we're saying is that, hey, it's already on the ballot. Let's do it.
Mm-hmm. Your new group is Citizens of the American Republic. You say we're at war. What does that really mean?
Well, the film says Trump at war. I mean, the film is about Trump. You know, Trump's at war against the permanent political class.
The film is your film.
Yeah, the film is my film. It's a film called Trump at War, and it shows you that Trump is at war with the permanent political class, the opposition party media, and basically he's at economic war with China. And so I think that when you look at this film, you see that President Trump is a disruptor and an innovator, and you see that he is kind of delivering on the promises he put forward to the American people. That he's not into just managing the decline of the country, but he's going to try to turn the country around. And so that's what the film is. I think it's a film that is focused on getting our base jacked up and our base out. Because if we don't get our base out on November 6th, we're going to have a very bad day at the polls. And so it's very important that the Trump voter and the invisible Trump voter show up like a presidential year. It's very important for us to show up.
What do you say to Republicans who say, why should they take your help if you haven't backed winning candidates in the special elections thus far?
Well, I think I did back winning candidates in the primary. And the Republican establishment in Alabama, Roy Moore specifically, I mean, Roy Moore would have won that election if Mitch McConnell and Shelby and these others hadn't turned against him. And so I think we've got a very good feel for how to win, a very good feel of how to turn people out. You know, I've been very involved in this since the Tea Party, the Tea Party election in 2010. So I think we have a very good idea of how to make these films and how to get people out.
You bring up Roy Moore. How can you blame Republicans in Washington for what happened out in Alabama? Didn't the voters there make up their mind?
Well, Shelby came out on Sunday morning on national TV and said, "I'm not voting for Roy Moore. I'm doing a write-in." You know, McConnell was the guy. It's the Republican establishment that dumped all this stuff to the Washington Post that turned against him when their candidate got smoked in the primary. So it was the Republican establishment that said from day one, we're not only going to support Roy Moore, they were already meeting to unseat Roy Moore and not to seat him if he'd even won. So that was the Republican establishment turning against him. And they were sending a signal. They would rather even lose control of the Senate than to allow disruptors in there.
How much money does your group have?
We've raised, quite a bit of money. I mean, we've made a pretty impressive film. We're going to release the film. I've got a 25-person staff. We run a war room every day. We do talking points. We do messaging.
$5 million?
Over $5 million. Yes.
Over $10 million?
I don't want to put a specific number on it.
Is it fair to say you have right now between $5 and $10 million?
I think it's fair to say that we've got enough resources and even more resources pouring in from donors, and we're eventually going to start a small donor program. By the way, I've never had a problem getting resources. Whether it was with Breitbart or doing other things, I've always had, because I've always delivered.
You're also very rich, and you know a lot of rich people.
I've had a pretty good run, and I do know some high net worth individuals. Yes.
Who is funding this group?
Well, it's private donors. Just private donors, just like in the Democratic Party and some of these groups. It's private donors.
Why not tell people who they are?
Well, because I think the donors want to be private. It's the law, and they got full right to do that. If they want to come forward,
the law allows them to go public or private.
If they want to come forward, if donors want to come forward, they can come forward.
Does it include Wall Street people, finance people, hedge fund people?
It definitely includes hedge fund people. Yes, absolutely. I think you would say we're very much focused on we're the China hawk, C4. I'm very upfront about, I think, what the situation is with China, and I would tend to think that there are people that back this that are China hawks.
So for you, it may be ideology. For them, they want to make money off what comes out of these elections because of their positions on China?
No. I think it's because of their patriotism.
Do they have
I don't think it's enough money in this. No,
do they have an investment outcome, though, in terms of their positions that they can benefit from this?
No.
Is there anyone you wouldn't?
It's really, I think, more about what they think the direction of the country is.
Is there anyone you would not take money from?
Well, I would not take money from foreigners, right? And there's certain people. I'm pretty selective about who I take money from. I've always had good partners. Always had partners that have been pretty happy. So I'm pretty selective about who I take money from. But I've never had a problem raising money. And I think you see, particularly in Wall Street and others, you see a lot of people that come from hard-scrabble backgrounds or blue-collar backgrounds that see that like this populism, that like economic nationalism, that kind of like the Trump program, that are pretty supportive.
But your critics say that you talk a lot of smack about Wall Street, but then you're funded by Wall Street. Your new group, you're admitting, is funded partly
not funded by Wall Street, but funded by certain individuals.
Well, you just told me it includes financiers and includes people with a position in China, is what you just said.
No, people that understand our position in China, the people that understand that we're kind of the China hawks. I didn't say they had a position in China.
But how do you? The question you understand, though, is how do you take on Wall Street if you're funded by Wall Street?
Well, by the way, individuals on Wall Street, some of the biggest guys on Wall Street are quite anti the antics that Wall Street's been up to. I came out of Wall Street. I was at Goldman Sachs. You kind of know what the game is. Just because you've made some money on Wall Street, or just because you're currently in a hedge fund, doesn't mean you don't know what the practices of Wall Street are. I think in fact, I think it's been a great way for some people that are blue collar, that have come from blue collar backgrounds to actually get ahead.
Last question on this, because you know the concern about money in politics runs across the spectrum. Yeah. Will you today encourage publicly your donors to come forward, because people do want to know who's involved in these elections across the spectrum?
It's their choice. If they want to come forward, they can come forward. I mean, we talk about that. I tell them, hey, if you want to come forward and say who you are, come forward. It's not a huge amount of money for them. If they want to come forward, come forward. But I think that if you look at it, where the money in politics comes from is the control of both political parties by the Wall Street faction, both the big donor class in the Republican Party and then the Wall Street faction that backs the Clintons and backs the centrists in the Democratic Party.
You're back in the mix partly because of this effort. Let me read to you what Axios reports some of the White House aides are saying. Sure. Quote, there is animus towards Bannon. And regarding his latest effort, when Bannon's name is mentioned to White House officials, they still, quote, roll their eyes. Your response?
I think that's fine. Look, you got to judge the White House on its results. I'll judge myself on my results. I have no problem with that at all.
What's your current relationship with President Trump?
You can see it every day on TV. I mean, it's exactly what people report. President Trump's doing his thing. I'm doing my thing. Remember, I didn't really know President Trump that well before I stepped in and took in as CEO of the campaign.
When's the last time you spoke?
A couple of months ago.
How do you get messages to him other than directly talking to him?
I think you can get messages to President Trump through talking to the staff, seeing you on TV, looking at what you're doing, seeing the film. I understand I made a short film on Afghanistan. Somebody told me he saw that. Did it in conjunction with Eric Prince. Somebody said he saw that. So look, President Trump, people talk about who talks to him, who gets to him, who does what. All President Trump's got to do is listen to himself. I mean, he's got a very definitive set of beliefs that he's acted on, and I think they've been terrific. And so he doesn't need Steve Bannon in his ear. He doesn't need all the stuff about all the stuff that I was a Svengali and all that. It's all nonsense made up by the opposition party media.
We're not going to go through all of it, but he said a lot about you when you had a public pardon. Do you think he still believes those things about you?
I don't know, and I don't care. Look, I come from an Irish Catholic family with a couple of brothers, so I've been in a situation where people call people names all the time. It doesn't affect me. I think President Trump has done a terrific job, and I think he sees that my group, and we've got a bunch of ex-people on the campaign. People have been around a long time. People have been around the Trump movement a long time. And I think he sees this, and I think he would view this as being very supportive.
Did you sign an NDA regarding your campaign experience or your White House experience?
I think everybody signed an NDA.
Did you?
Yes, I think everybody had to sign an NDA.
So does your NDA limit what you're willing or able to say about the president right now?
No, it doesn't, at least in my interpretation.
And do you have any funds that come to you pursuant to any NDA you've gotten with the president or the campaign?
What do you mean by that?
Are you paid pursuant to an NDA contract or a separation agreement? Are you receiving money in exchange for the terms of the NDA?
No, an NDA is just a non-disclosure agreement. I don't think it's something you get paid for.
Well, often there has to be some consideration in a contract.
If you were to break with NBC and you had a 2-year payout, you would have a non-disclosure agreement during that time so that you couldn't badmouth NBC in that time. The White House doesn't work. The White House doesn't work like that.
Your time at the White House is controversial. You know that. What do you?
Well, I think it depends on who you're talking to.
I
think if you talk to the populace, it was quite a non-controversial.
I'm here talking to you because we want to get your perspective. Okay. What do you see as your accomplishments when you were in the White House?
Well, I think one of the accomplishments was kind of help. Remember, President Trump, the central part of the campaign was about managed decline. You know, President Trump went in there and said, "Hey, we're just not going to do things the old way. I'm just not there to see the decline of the country, whether it's in North Korea, in China, in Iran, in the Persian Gulf with the financing of radical Islamic terrorism." So I think one of the biggest things was just to sit there and support. Now, I had the whiteboard, just to sit there and just go through the campaign process.
So your accomplishments were?
Well, I think the accomplishments were to kind of set the framework for what the Trump agenda was and just kind of prioritize it. If you look a year and a half later, to me, he's doing everything on the campaign trail that he said he was going to do. Right? He's going down one thing after the other and doing it. And so I think it's been quite positive. And I think my time at the White House was kind of set the framework for that, set the context for that.
The main piece of economic legislation that has been passed in the Trump administration is the tax bill. Most of those benefits go to the very wealthy. Is that a mistake?
Well, no. Hang on for a second. The tax bill, the central part of the tax bill was also the corporate tax bill, was to make sure that we were competitive with Germany and China. And if you look at manufacturing jobs coming back here, it's part and parcel of the situation we're in with the tariffs. The economic package and the tax package, that was the central part of it. So you look at manufacturing jobs and hand.
I hear you globally.
No, I'm talking not
the tax
globally.
Policy says 83% of the benefits
not globally.
go to the top 1%.
Not globally. I'm talking about what happened here. What happened here in manufacturing jobs coming back. That's why you've got such economic growth in the country. One of the reasons is the tax bill. Now, I didn't actually love some of the things on the personal income tax. Remember, the Wall Street Journal reported in the Oval Office, I fought for a 44% tax for people making over $5 million. I lost that fight, but it's not that can't be readdressed sometime in the future.
When you see 83% going to the top 1%, is that too much?
I think what's important is what's happening with corporate America, is that corporate America is becoming more competitive, and we're repatriating $3 trillion of cash to come back here and invest in the United States. I think this is about manufacturing jobs, and I think if you look at President Trump's overall economic agenda, it's working. It's working for middle class and working class people.
I got one more tax thing, and then I want to hit some other policy. You talk about populism.
Yes.
The president went to Mar-a-Lago, where membership is $200,000, and told people the tax bill meant, quote, "You all just got a lot richer." Is that your populism?
Look, I think populism, when you look at President Trump, is about his entire program, okay? This tax cut was focused on industrial tax cut. and repatriation of cash. It was to make the manufacturing side of this country stronger. We had the 100% write-off of capital expenditure in period zero. This was all about rebuilding the manufacturing base, and that is the type of populism I'm talking about. Am I totally excited about every aspect of the tax bill? Not that excited. Remember, I was a big supporter of Paul Ryan's border adjustable tax, and that didn't go anywhere. So we went to Plan B. So, and do I think this can get better over time? Absolutely. But I think, given the context and given the situation, this is a very strong tax bill. And look at the economic growth. I just want to quote something. I brought a heuristic device. A paper that's not a fan of President Trump, which is the Financial Times of London. Today, Walmart bask in U.S. economic glow. And Walmart is a proxy for the working class, because when Walmart's good, the working class and the middle class in this country are doing well. I just want to quote the CEO for a second. Customers tell us that they feel better about the current health of the U.S. economy as well as their personal finances. They're more confident about their employment opportunities. And that's the CEO of Walmart. And Walmart's known, as you know, Ari, on Wall Street as being a proxy for how the working class and middle class are doing. So
you're bringing up Walmart. It's a big company. It employs a lot of people, and a lot of people get cheap products there. But as you know, the labor conditions at Walmart are significantly under strain and under criticism.
By the way,
is that a dream job, a Walmart job?
I'm not a huge proponent of how they treat their employees. What I'm saying is they're talking about the results, and what they're talking about is the overall economy. That tax cut, okay, that tax plan, the tax reorganization was a central part of that, along with tariffs and other things. The president is focused on rebuilding the manufacturing base of this country, and bringing jobs back from China, that is populism.
Let me read you something you said after the 2016 election victory. The conservatives are going to go crazy. I'm the guy pushing $1 trillion infrastructure plan, the greatest opportunity to rebuild everything. Shipyards, ironworks, it will be as exciting as the 1930s, greater than the Reagan Revolution. You didn't get that done at the White House. Why not?
Well, because I think we triaged that. We're going to do health care first, the tax cut second, and infrastructure third. And obviously we had a lot of trouble with health care. Right? And by the way, we tied ourselves to the Republican establishment because that was kind of the unity we had to win. The Republican establishment was going to do health care. We also worked together initially with Paul Ryan and his border adjustable tax, which didn't go anywhere. We then kind of went to Plan B, which is the tax bill that you saw. The third was going to be infrastructure. I'm a huge proponent that we ought to move forward with an infrastructure program. And I would hope that President Trump, and I think you'll see it, that come after the victory in November this year, in 2019, you'll start to see the movement in infrastructure.
How does Donald Trump run for re-election in 2020 without ever having done anything on infrastructure?
Well, first off, you got the economy growing at 4%. I mean, right now you've got.
So you're okay with leaving it be?
No. I think at appropriate time we got to come back with an infrastructure plan. We got to figure out how to pay for it. Now that we've got a $4.3 trillion appropriations bill, and we have $1 trillion deficits, going forward. I think until we start paying off those deficits, we're going to figure out how to do infrastructure. But there's no doubt with the growth of the economy, the economic growth, that I think President Trump's going to be very well situated. And I strongly believe that what he's going to do is pivot to infrastructure. Remember, infrastructure has always been at the top, one of his top priorities.
But not till after the re-elect, you're saying?
Well, after the re-elect this re-elect here in November this year.
About 18.
Yes.
Let me read you more.
But by the way, to me, this is a re-elect, and in 19, I think it will be one of the driving forces of what he does next year.
I'm going to read you more Bannon.
Okay, yes, sir.
Quote, 2016.
I love hearing Bannon.
2016, sir. Not one criminal charge has ever been brought to any bank executive associated with the 2008 crisis. You said that then you got in office. Why hasn't that happened under the Trump administration, and what should be done about that?
I think, look, we're on the 10th year anniversary. This September is the 10th year anniversary of the financial crisis. Donald Trump, as I said at New York Magazine last week, is the fuse was lit in 2008, and Donald Trump was the explosion. He's the result of the financial crisis. It was during the Obama administration under Eric Holder that all the criminal referrals went to, and the Justice Department really didn't do anything with him. He's a Covington and Burley, white-collar criminal lawyer. I think it's outrageous. I think the Justice Department should be. I think we ought to. I think on the 10th.
You think the lack of action by the Trump Justice Department is outrageous, or you're just mad at Eric Holder when he was in office and now he's in private practice?
Hang on. I am very upset about Obama and all those years when nothing was done.
Right, but I'm asking you about who has power now.
Well, I think. By the way, I think Senator Sessions. What I would hope would happen. Okay, and particularly on the 10th year anniversary, is we start to review some of that, and I think people ought to be held accountable. No one's been held accountable for the financial crisis, and here we are 10 years afterwards, and we still have no accountability. And I don't think any real explanation of what went on.
So you were applying that to both administrations then, to Sessions as well?
Absolutely.
You mentioned that you think impeachment's driving Democrats. What else is driving Democratic turnout in your view in 2018?
I think it's stopping the Trump program. I think President Trump has triggered certain elements of the Democratic Party. And
what about the Me Too movement?
Well, if you look at the three movements that I think are most innovated, I don't think it's the Me Too. I call it the Time's Up. I think the Time's Up movement is much senior. Me Too is about sexual harassment. I think Time's Up is a much more what I call primal. That's really about the power dynamics in society.
What does Time's Up mean to you?
What Time's Up means to me is at the end of the patriarchy. It's Time's Up and the end of the patriarchy, and what they want to have is a fundamental shift in the power dynamics in society. And so I think you have the Time's Up movement, you have what I call the resistance, and then I think you have Tom Steyer's impeach the president. I think those three elements are kind of the enthusiasm on the left.
Time's up. So you say challenge the patriarchy. Given the history of gender relations in this country and around the world, and the desire for gender equality, isn't that a good thing to revise the patriarchy, as you put it?
My oldest daughter is a West Point graduate that served with the 101st Airborne. We have a picture of her on the mantle right there, sitting on the throne of Saddam Hussein in her uniform with the 101st Airborne. Now, I'm a huge believer in equality, right? And my daughters, I think, are living proof of that, and the rest of my family. So, no, I'm a huge believer in that. I think there's some justifiable. I think in the Time's Up movement, as a subset of that, some of the things that are going on in sexual harassment, particularly in the media companies that have not been vetted with the executives, is something that really needs to be done. And so, yeah, I think I'm not 100% with the Time's Up movement, but I can see it's a very powerful political force. I was the one that said I think somebody like Oprah Winfrey will come out of that movement and could be actually win the Democratic nomination.
I can't quite tell if you're saying it's a good thing. Bottom line, is it constructive?
I think it is constructive to always review things like this. I think some of the radicalness of that movement is not a positive thing, but I think that it's always good to question your assumptions. And so I think that some of the things that are coming out of it, particularly what we found out in some of these companies, the things that went on, I think is quite positive.
There are people who would observe that the way you talk about your daughter and what you just said about gender relations is very different from the way Donald Trump talks. Times that by a gender gap now that, as you know, is 20 points in negative views of the president. Is this party, let me finish the question and then you get your time.
Sure.
Is this party walking away from women voters or college-educated women voters?
Well, first off, we won, white women 52-48 over Hillary Clinton, the first female nominee in history. I think we won white working-class women something like 69 or 70%, 70-30. And so Donald Trump does resonate with that. I realize
Let me respond and then I'll give you more time.
Okay, fine.
The gender gap in 2016 was at 11 points, was the largest in 20 years.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, but I think a lot of that was also minority women, right? And Donald Trump, I think we won 8% of overall African-American voters, but I think we had a very big turnout in African-American women. But there was never a question.
And I'll give you time. The question is Donald Trump walking away and walking the GOP away from these women voters?
He's definitely not walking away. Look at Ivanka. I think Ivanka has been very engaged in women's issues. She's talking about, job training and all these other things. I think she's very engaged. I think you see the way that Donald Trump has a terrific relationship with his daughter and his wife shows that what he thinks about this. I think a lot of things that people jump on some of the tweets, or they've jumped on some of the things that they allegedly happened during the campaign, right? Or women that came out during the campaign to try to stop it as we push through that. Let's go to Billy Bush weekend. I mean, Billy Bush weekend, everybody said he should resign. Some of the Republican establishment said he should resign. People walked away from the campaign, and what he did is he presented the facts of the locker room talk, and then we went to St. Louis the next night, and I brought the people that Bill Clinton had actually molested, and I think that the American people weighed and measured that and voted in November. And you
brought adult women who were accusers of Bill Clinton, yes, and you said they should be heard.
Yes.
And the response from many people is, what about the accusers of Donald Trump? Should they be heard? He threatened to sue them and suggested that would resolve it. He never sued them. He's facing suits from them. And Roy Moore, who you backed, of course, faced his own accusers, including multiple women who say he preyed on them when they were under 18.
By the way,
if you're bringing it, you brought it up.
By the way,
you brought it up.
No,
if you're bringing it up, what about those accusers?
By the way, if they want to come forward, they should come forward. If they want to come forward, they should come forward. Some of them are coming forward in the court system right now. So if they want to come forward, they're not shy about going after Donald Trump. But back to your question, Donald Trump hasn't abandoned women. He has not abandoned women at all. I think if you look at the economy, if you look at what he's doing across the board, that they're the beneficiaries of this. And I think Donald Trump's going to play very well.
But you bring up those accusers.
Yep.
What do you say to people who see your backing of Roy Moore, who was accused of legally worse things, and they think? I'll finish the question, and you get time.
Hang on.
Steve, I will finish the question. And I will give you your response time.
Yes, sir.
What do you say to people who say to you, is the only standard here partisanship and whether you like the candidate if you're not giving Roy Moore's accusers the same time?
Well, by the way, Roy Moore's accusers had time during the campaign. They're going to have additional time. They came forward. They had the Washington Post. They had the biggest platforms in media. Roy Moore was buried by that. You can't sit there and reasonably ask, did they not have adequate representation? Did they not have a platform? They had the biggest media platforms in the country.
The question
gets to be, how legitimate were those? Did they ever turn out to be something? And that's going to be adjudicated.
Did it ever shake your view? Did you ever say,
no,
maybe I shouldn't be with this person?
Absolutely not.
Given what these women allege.
Absolutely not. When we looked because we looked at the allegations, I don't believe them then. I did not believe them then. I do not believe them today. And if they get adjudicated over time, maybe I changed my mind. But from the facts that I saw then and the facts I see now, absolutely not.
I want to ask you about more of your time in the White House, but anything else that you want to say on this topic? I don't want to cut you off.
No, I just think if you look at it, I think President Trump, look, a lot of people, you got to separate the signal from the noise. A lot of people get hooked up on the Twitter account and hooked up on what I think is kind of all marginalia. If you look at what he's doing, which is really saying, hey, I'm rejecting the decline of the country, and whether that's in this economic war with China or whether it's reordering the American economy and really getting jobs for working class people, that's what I think. We talk about gender. I think he's going to have very strong representation among women. That's one of the reasons I'm telling people, hey, let's get out there and get the Trump coalition that won in 2016. If we get that coalition, which included women, we're going to win and we're going to do fine.
So, bottom line, and a lot of people disagree vehemently with your view of it, but bottom line, you're saying that what was a historic 11-point gap that currently is 20 with Trump and women, you think somehow it will close?
I think somehow we can definitely close it from 20. Absolutely. Do we get it to the 11? I don't know, but I think you can close it from 20. And I think more importantly, we can close it in those districts that we have to win to hold the House. There's no doubt about that.
Turning to your time in the White House.
Yes, sir.
You had a front row seat that many people would be very interested in. I want to start with a very basic question.
Yep.
When did you first hear about a proposal to fire James Comey?
Well, it's been publicly talked about, in the week before, right, on the weekend before Bedminster, the week before it happened. That's when it was starting to be discussed. I mean, I think it's been pretty well vetted in the press. I was not a fan of that. I thought the Comey investigation was... The reason I wasn't a fan is I said the Comey investigation is going nowhere. It's going to start to peter out. I actually used a rival of yours, Anderson Cooper. I said it's on the C block at Anderson Cooper. There's no more juice in this thing, and it'll just play out over time, and let's just deal with it.
Who did you tell that to?
Well, I talked to the president. I mean, that's been pretty well reported. I was not a fan of the firing of Comey.
And then, as you mentioned, they go to the Bedminster Golf Club, and there started to be an effort by staff to write a letter about the reasons to fire Comey.
That I don't know, because it's one of the reasons I left the White House. I came on the campaign in August of 16, and I'd always set 1 year. I was going to leave in August of 17. I told Maggie Haberman of the New York Times very early. I'm just, all I was in the White House was a staffer. I was a senior staffer, but I was a staffer. You can't run your own operation. You report to the President of the United States, Chief of Staff.
You were a White House advisor to the President with walk-in privileges, no?
I was, but what that is, you can give your advice to the President, and you're one of a number of voices, and he either accepts it or doesn't. So when I basically laid out the facts of what I thought the Comey situation was, if people decide to go in a different direction, then it's not my thing. I'm not there to try to fight things to the very end.
So you advise against it. Walk us through the day he was fired.
Well, the day he's fired, I see it on TV like everybody else. I mean, I'm sitting in the Chief of Staff's office. I'm working on something for Rice that needs to be done. I see it up on TV. And
what did you think?
I thought, as I said, I thought it was a big mistake, and I thought it would lead to a special counsel. I mean, I think everything I said at the time basically worked itself out. That it was going to lead to a special counsel. I think if the Comey investigation had been allowed to continue, it would have taken another couple of months and it wrapped up.
Do you think at that time, the day Comey was fired, that Donald Trump or Mike Pence understood this could become evidence in an obstruction case?
I don't think it was obstruction. The president had full authority to fire Comey. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I disagree with it, but he had absolutely full authority. And he never said. By the way, when he fired Comey, he didn't say to the guys of the FBI to shut down the investigation. The investigation was still continuing on. Remember, the investigation is not really run by Comey. It didn't want to be run by McCabe. There are other people there running it that report up to McCabe and to Comey. So he didn't sit there and go, hey, oh, by the way, I'm firing Comey and shut down the investigation. So I don't know why they would ever think that, because the investigation was going to continue on.
Well,
I think if that is what Mueller's working on as one of the obstruction things, I think it's a pretty thin reed to lean on.
We're not in court, but I brought a little bit of evidence that you're familiar with.
Okay.
The president, as you know, linked his own criminal exposure and liability to the firing of Comey in that letter. You advised him not to do the firing. Didn't that make it more likely that there would be a special counsel?
I don't know if that made it, but I thought that if you fired the head of the FBI, that it would lead to a special counsel. I advised that. I don't know if the signing of that brought it, but I thought it would lead to a special counsel. I said that. That's why I thought firing Comey was stupid. Like I said, the FBI investigation I thought was I believe, start to wind down. It lost any kind of real juice. Even in the most vitriolic of networks, CNN, and I thought it just should play out. And also, there's no Russian collusion, so let's just cooperate and do what you got to do.
So there you are working in the White House. Yep. This firing occurs. When is the first time during your White House service that you ever talked to Bob Mueller?
Well, Bob Mueller came in, and gave advice or was interviewed, as has been publicly reported, for FBI director. And Bob Mueller, I was sitting in kind of the outer office, and Mueller actually walks up to me, and I've never met him before in my life. I'm standing actually in back of Hope Hicks at her computer terminal, and we're talking about something. He walks up and says, he just shook hands and said, Steve, I can't believe, Mueller's a Marine. He says, Steve, I can't believe somebody in the senior naval service allowed his daughter to matriculate at West Point. And I just laughed, and I told somebody later, it's a pretty thorough guy to know that. So that's the first time I ever met him.
What was he trying to say to you?
I think he was just trying to just introduce himself. At that time, he was actually there to give advice on the type of person that we should select to be FBI director.
So, this is pretty fascinating. You're there working in the White House right after Comey's fired.
Right.
Bob Mueller walks in, says this to you, and then he what? Goes into the Oval?
Yeah, it's been reported. He was, they reached out to him, Vice President Pence, the president, to talk about the attributes that one would look for in an FBI director.
And that's the last time him and Donald Trump have spoken face to face.
I have no idea.
You refer to public reporting. That's to our understanding, and the White House doesn't claim otherwise. Right. Did you hear anything about their conversation?
No, I was not part of that. That was I think it was the Attorney General, and I think it was Vice President Pence and the President had a meeting, and I didn't need to be a part of that.
Was Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein there that day?
I don't know. Don't remember.
Did that then precipitate any of the discussions about Mueller becoming special counsel, which was a Rosenstein decision?
I don't know. That was something that White House counsel would know. I only try to involve myself in things that are in my bailiwick. That was not my bailiwick. I was part of the overall team, though, that reviewed with Senator Sessions at the time the people that he was going to select to be in the senior leadership of the Attorney General's office. Rosenstein was one of those. And I've been pretty adamant about Rosenstein, about these failure of effectuating the subpoenas on Capitol Hill. And I have said, vocally, just like I said, I thought the president should fire Ty Cobb and John Dow, because I thought they were doing a terrible job representing him as his counsel and as White House counsel. I thought Rosenstein should have 72 hours. I've been adamant about this. I think President Trump ought to direct Rosenstein to fully effectuate all the subpoenas on the Hill dealing with Crossfire Hurricane, that all that material should be turned over to the appropriate committees. And if he doesn't do it in 48 or 72 hours, give him some amount of time, I think you ought to fire Rosenstein. And it's not for obstruction. I think it's for transparency. The administration should turn those things over to the appropriate committees on the Hill.
Did you ever hear Donald Trump talk about wanting to fire Sessions, Rosenstein, or Mueller?
Well, first off, I can't go into all that stuff because it's still an open investigation. And I am a witness of fact in a number of these, but I would just check reporting on that. But I think all of this stuff, I think all the obstruction stuff that at least I've read about in the paper, are all pretty thin reeds to hold on to. Things like the firing of Comey, whatever happened on Air Force One, or all the situations with Sessions, are pretty thin reads.
You say you're a witness of fact.
Yep.
Which is a good thing for you.
I think so, yeah.
You haven't been advised that you were something worse in their eyes. Are you a witness of fact to the investigation regarding obstruction or collusion or both?
I think I'm a witness of fact for all of it. I think I'm a witness of fact for all of it. I mean, when they call you up there, they don't really kind of bifurcate. They kind of go through the whole thing. And, of course, I've been to Capitol Hill, right, a couple of times. So, I'm a witness of fact up there also.
How many days did you talk to Mueller's investigators?
I don't want to go into the details, but I had a very thorough session, right? He did, and it was over several days. I don't want to be specific about how many, but
I respect it on the details, and I get that.
Right.
On the other hand, some witnesses have spoken out, some of them even work with you, and it's fascinating when we can learn something. It's part of our jobs. What else can you tell us about what you walked away from at a broad level? Did you feel they were professional? Did you feel it was a witch hunt? What did you take from it?
Listen, I do think that there are elements of this, particularly as things are leaked, that it looks like it's a witch hunt. I think what's most disturbing is
did you feel that from your time with them?
Hang on, the IG report that came out about Strzok and some of the stuff at the FBI, it's clearly causing a question about this entire thing, and particularly the Crossfire Hurricane, which is the second part of it, about the the oversight of this investigation into the Trump campaign and led into the transition in the Trump administration. Everything that was done that I engaged with Bob Mueller, and I've said from day one, Bob Mueller is a patriot, is a combat Marine. I've got a lot of respect for him personally. And I think that his investigation ought to play out, and I think he ought to do a report. I've also advocated, I think it's very important for Bob Mueller to do the report and to put it out before the November elections. And so, no, but everything in my relationship with him has been very professional. I will tell people, it's quite thorough. Right, it's quite thorough, but I don't want to say it's a proctology exam, but it's quite thorough. But I think it's very professional. Now, there's certain aspects that I've seen in the press, particularly about some of the FBI and CIA and others, that I think call into question this entire thing. And I think you could argue that's a witch hunt. And I think the American people are starting to come this way. So that's why I think it's...
Let me make sure I'm hearing you right. Let me make sure I'm hearing you right.
This is what I think behooves Mueller, is to get the report done and let's get it out and let people decide.
What I hear you saying is your personal experience in that questioning and dealing with Bob Mueller is that you were not treated in a way that made you think it was a witch hunt, but your observations of other public information, Peter Strzok, the IG report, gives you that concern.
Yes.
Copy. Is Jeff Sessions a real Attorney General?
Look, Jeff Sessions is really the father of kind of this populist movement, right? He's an agrarian populist. I've been very close. In fact, in this very space right over there is in 2013, Sessions and Stephen Miller and I sat down and kind of plotted out what we thought would be the 2016 Republican primary and how we were going to make trade from number 100 to the number 2 issue and make immigration like the number 1 issue. So I'm very close to Senator Sessions. I think he's done a terrific job in some areas, particularly in immigration and other areas. I am one of the people that are very disappointed about how he's comported himself in other areas, particularly this thing with the subpoenas and Crossfire Hurricane. I think that these things ought to be effectuated. I'm also being the people that drove Clinton Cash was my organization at the time that came out with the book and then came out with the movie later. I think the Clintons and particularly Uranium One and other aspects of it should be investigated. So I think Senator Sessions in that regard has been very missed. Now, I totally agree. I think it was appropriate, and I know there are many people that disagree with me, including the president, that he should have recused himself from any direct involvement in this investigation. In fact, I think, to my belief, Rudy Giuliani, Chris Christie, and Jeff Sessions, those three who were quite prominent on the campaign, all of them would have had to recuse himself, even for Grassley's committee.
You think that was right?
I think it was right. I think it was practical. I'm not so sure Senator Grassley's committee would have even voted him out to go to the floor for a full vote as Attorney General if they had not recused themselves for aspects of the investigation.
Right.
So I think there are aspects of the Justice Department. I think that Senator Sessions has been a big letdown. And I'm
a letdown, but is Donald Trump wrong to continually attack him and say he's not a real Attorney General?
It's the president's. The president selected him. He's the Attorney General that the president selected. That's the president's prerogative. That I don't totally agree, but that's the president's prerogative. I can understand, given everything else the president's got going on in the Middle East with Korea, I can understand how this gets under his skin sometimes. And it's been a big issue of him from the beginning. I think Senator Sessions could have done a much better job in certain areas. I'm very disappointed in Sessions and Rosenstein about failing to put forward what the information they want in these subpoenas. And I agree with David Rifkin. I think of Baker Hotsteller. He wrote this big piece in the Wall Street Journal a couple of months ago called "The Fruits of the Poisonous Tree." I mean, he actually argued when the Crossfire Hurricane subpoenas are effectuated, when we see that information, you almost have to adjudicate that before you continue on with parts of the Mueller investigation. So I think that this whole thing has got to be really drilled down on. And I think Sessions in that regard has done a very poor job, and I think one of his biggest advocates.
When you said the Trump Tower meeting with the Russians was treasonous, and you said you meant Paul Manafort.
Yeah.
What about it made it treasonous in your view?
I just didn't look. I think for a professional like Paul Manafort, I don't think you ought to ever have, forget it, just, people from other countries, Russians or whatever, come in and try to get opposition research. There's enough opposition research out there. Look, Clinton Cash, to me, did all the opposition research you had to do. You just had to get down there and drill down on it. And as we did when I took over the campaign on that Monday, or when I was CEO of the campaign with Kellyanne as campaign manager, on that Monday, the first day we kind of took over, we put out I think a statement from then candidate Trump. It was about Paul Manafort when Manafort was, I think, getting ready to resign, and we referenced Clinton Cash and her corruption in Clinton Cash.
So by your standard, it's that knowledge of the foreign offer of help.
Well, no, I don't. Not even the foreign offer of help. I think it's even just trying to do something like that. I think is
trying to do something like that. So if Donald Trump knew about that, then he was in on treasonous behavior in your standard.
No, and I'm not. Look, it hasn't been proven that he knew anything about it. We don't know anything. Knew anything about it. He's denied knowing anything about it.
You said there's zero chance Don Jr. didn't tell him, and Michael Cohen reportedly says Trump knew about it.
Well, you have to take Michael Cohen for Michael Cohen, right? You're just going to have to take, you don't know what Michael Cohen's doing with federal authorities, what deals he's cutting, what he's trying to do with federal authorities.
If a candidate knows about that in advance, then are they part of treasonous behavior by your standard?
I think you have to call into question if somebody's actually out there trying to get information from foreign parties. You have to question it. Yeah.
So if Mueller could prove that about Donald Trump, that would concern you?
It would definitely concern me. Yes, but the president's been pretty adamant that he didn't know about it and hasn't known about it.
Charlottesville.
Yep.
Was the president wrong to say there was blame on both sides?
No, he's absolutely correct. Listen, the whole discussion and what the president was saying, and go back and look at those statements he made. If you look at it, what he's saying is that the discussion about the Confederate monuments, whether the Confederate monuments should be covered, whether the Confederate monuments should be removed, or whether the Confederate monuments of these generals are part of Southern heritage. There are people on both sides, and that's their First Amendment right to debate that and to march on that and to protest that. And that's what he was trying to say.
You said what the president said? Let's look at what...
Hang on. And if he says, where is it all in? If you talk about the neo-Nazis and the neo-Confederates and the KKK and Antifa, I think the president has been adamant in saying that both of those parties are wrong. Both those parties shouldn't be allowed to come there and start to cause havoc, and that authorities ought to shut that down. The president, I think, was very clear on this. This is
what the president said. Let's go to the words. Right. Quote, I think there's blame on both sides. You had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. Nobody wants to say it, but I will say it right now. It was the organizers of the rally that talked about anti-black prejudice, that chanted anti-Semitic slogans, and there's, as you know, a second-degree murder charge for Heather Heyer's death
He's
right
been
now.
Absolutely adamant about this. That's what I'm saying. When you talk about the Confederate monuments and you talk about whether they should stay or not or be covered or not, the president's saying there's good people on both sides, okay? When you talk about the people that come there for violence, he's condemned those people. He condemned the neo-Confederates. He condemned the neo-Nazis. He condemned the KKK. He also condemned Antifa. And if you look at Cuomo the other night, the problem with the left and the problem with the mainstream media, you give Antifa a complete free pass. They are just as violent as the neo-Confederates. They're just as violent as these KKK guys. And they have to be condemned. And that's where you're seeing the violence come from. I've actually advocated, even a situation like Charlottesville, to me, they shouldn't have the right to kind of march because they come looking for a fight. They come to do violence, and what you're seeing is not just a tremendous cost, but you're also seeing violence. And I think the president, I think this is where he's being smeared. I think he's been I don't think he could be more adamant about that. And look at this march that happened the other day. What, well, nine guys showed up. It's the mainstream media that continues to give marginal people, these marginal guys, a platform and make them bigger than they are.
Let's finish on Charlottesville, and then we can talk about anything you want to bring up. On Charlottesville.
But Sunday was Charlottesville. It was the anniversary.
The anniversary.
Right.
I'm referring to the original time where there was this killing, and there was not a killing on both sides. There was a killing, as you know, on one side. Let me read another quote to you. This is from David Duke.
But by the way,
let me finish and then I'll give you.
Hang on for a second.
Let me finish and then I'll give you time,
Just because
Steve.
David Duke and all this marginalia.
I'm going to give you a response, but I got to read you what he said for your response. David Duke says.
Stop. Hang on for a second. Hang on for a second. Just because you've got these marginal cranks that come out and want to latch on to Donald Trump doesn't explain the entire thing. This is what you guys are doing.
I'm not saying it explains the entire thing.
Ari, you know this. The President of the United States could not have been more adamant in condemning these people.
Let me read this to you for your response.
It's outrageous that you take these marginal groups, these neo-Confederates and KKK guys, because they come out and say something about Donald Trump. The media blows it up as like, oh, they're the wingman for Trump. Nothing could be farther from the truth.
I'm giving you the opportunity to respond. That what David Duke said was that Charlottesville was, quote, a turning point for the people of this country, determined to take our country back and fulfill the promises of Donald Trump. He said he's going to take our country back, end quote. Is that
That's total nonsense. David Duke is a hater. He has no position in this movement. Donald Trump is one of the best guys I've ever seen. He's done more for the African American community as far as economic nationalism goes. I mean, look at the unemployment rate. Look what his policies are. This is a guy that wants all Americans. Remember, on the night we won, Stephen Miller and I drafted a victory speech that was a throwdown. It was Trump that came in there and said, "Hey, I want to de-escalate. Tonight, let's try to bring the country together. We've had a very tough campaign. It's been very active. Let's take the acrimony down." And Miller and I were ready to go. Let's throw down and march on Washington. It was Donald Trump and his wisdom said, "Hey, guys, let's de-escalate. Let's try to bring the country together." So you got cranks like this that come out and try to latch on to Donald Trump and the movement. You're not going to stop this populist movement. You're not going to stop this economic nationalist movement by continuing to refer to these cranks. Sunday showed, 9 guys show up. There's, 500 media, a couple thousand cops. These guys are cranks. Nobody takes them seriously except the main. It's MSNBC's camera and CNN's camera gives them a platform. If you didn't pay attention to them, they would.
I'm ready to move on, but when you say that about the press, are you suggesting we shouldn't cover this killing and this second-degree murder trial?
I didn't say that. Come on, I didn't say that. The guy should be tried for murder. First-degree murder, not second-degree murder, okay? Guys like that are bad guys. And there's just as many bad guys on the other side. The Antifa movement is very violent. Somebody said the other day in this trailer I did for my spot, "Oh, my gosh, where'd you get this stuff from?" I said it's from Trump rallies. These are just Trump people that are being beaten up. You have violence on both sides. It has no place in America. And as long as we keep giving these guys platforms, okay, they're just going to think they're bigger and bigger and bigger. This stuff could be shut down very easily. I think local authorities, particularly when you have neo-Nazis and neo-Confederates with these Antifa guys looking for a fight, there's no reason the Charlottesvilles of the world should accommodate that. Peaceful protests and this protest about the Confederate monuments, I come from the South. I'm from Richmond. And it's a hot issue down there. And one way or the other, through politics and through the ballot box, it's going to be resolved. And that's the way America is. I've got one opinion. Other people have other opinions. It's one of the reasons I don't agree with, but I respect the energy of the Time's Up movement. I respect the energy of the resistance, and I respect the energy of even what Tom Steyer's doing. I saw that energy in 2010 in the Tea Party movement. And so what I think is that thing will be resolved. And it'll be resolved by who wins elections. And this is why I'm so pumped up for November 6th, because I think as Donald Trump continues to focus on the November 6th election, that you're going to see this as an up or down vote. That as we get closer, and you're not going to see a blue wave, I think that you're going to see the left of the Democratic Party are going to sit there and turn what they're going to do. And you're finally going to have the internecine civil war inside the Democratic Party has been put off. We've been at this. The populists in the Republican Party have been at this for 9-10 years. Okay? Some days we win against the establishment, and more often we lose. But we continue to try to make progress. I think in the Democratic Party, it's been suppressed. And I think as we get closer to November 6th, and you do not see a blue wave, I think it's going to become quite evident on the left. And they're going to sit there and go, hey, this Wall Street ownership of the Democratic Party, this pillow fight that we've been having against the Democratic establishment has got to stop. And I think you're going to see a complete civil war in the Democratic Party, and it's going to clear the path for Donald Trump in 2020.
Turning to immigration.
Okay.
What is the right level of immigration in your view when documented immigration is declining?
Well, I think I like what on legal immigration. I like the RAISE Act. I think what the RAISE Act talks about. I think it's 500,000 is a good number, but I think that can be adjusted with the economy over time. Right now, what I would like to see with the stopping of what I would like to see is a stopping of H-1B visas until we start getting better employment by the minority communities in Silicon Valley and in these tech jobs. I think we ought to still consider stopping H-1B visas. I think the future of the country in technology is to make sure that we've got people coming from the inner cities. Remember, we've changed the entire education system over to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And yet we still don't have enough minorities in engineering schools. I went to a land-grant university, basically engineering school, Virginia Tech. And I would love to see more minorities in the engineering schools, and I would love to see more minorities in Silicon Valley. I think one of the ways to do that is not to open up competition to our American citizens to the world. I think we've got to be very careful about starting to nurture, right, our citizenship here, and particularly in technology jobs. So that's where I think we've got to be very careful about all immigration. So illegal immigration is nothing more than to try to suppress the wages of working class blacks and Hispanics.
So when you say that, and then you look at the statistics that say a majority of billion-dollar capitalized tech companies in this country have at least one foreign founder, what about losing that and losing those jobs?
Well, first off, I think I'm not a big proponent. I think for the world to be a better place and to start to have better economies throughout the world, this whole thing that we've got to take the best and the brightest from everywhere, and it's got to come to the United States and be educated here and stay here. I would hope that I would hope people would come here and be educated in the United States and then go back to their countries and form the companies there. So look, I think it's very helpful on one side, but I think if you allow opportunities and we have more blacks and Hispanics in engineering schools, you're going to see more in blacks and Hispanics as these tech innovators in times going forward. That's what I think is very important. I mean, I think we have to nurture American citizen. Remember, economic nationalism doesn't care about your race, your color, your ethnicity, your gender, your sexual preference. What it cares about is you're a citizen of the United States. It's one of the reasons in this group I founded. I said one of the things that I think really hurt the country back in the 80s, came out of the business school, is this whole thing of maximization of shareholder value. And I like the fact that Elizabeth Warren kind of ripped me off in using that the other day when she laid out her
You think you guys agree on that?
We definitely agree on that. I don't think there's any doubt. I think there was a radical theory that came out of the business schools and went to Wall Street that everything had to come back to the equity holders. Maximization of shareholder value was this mantra. I think it was very destructive and not thinking about the different stakeholders in modern capitalism. And I think that's got to be changed. What I'm saying in our group is that we're trying to maximize your citizenship value. Part of that is to make sure that you don't have to have unfair competition. Remember, illegal immigration, immigration, and trade are two sides of the same coin. That's what we talked about here with Sessions and Miller back in 2013. Trade is just allowing unfair competition by foreign labor against our own labor manufacturing. Illegal immigration is just allowing that labor to come here. It's all about the suppression of wages.
What do you say?
HB1 visa is the same thing. All Silicon Valley wants is higher margin.
And that's talking about skilled labor. When you go to what is called unskilled labor, as you know, a lot of this is not direct competition. That the most common job for a native-born American without a diploma is a cashier. And it's the least common job for documented immigrants. So what do you say to people who think that you are building a fear about jobs being taken that is not supported by the evidence?
By the way, in construction, oil field services, and agriculture, okay, this is where you're starting to see wages rise finally. You've got to restrict illegal immigration, or you're just going to have unfair competition in the Hispanic and black working class. If somebody says you have to have this minimum wage, I'm saying, hey, if we restrict the labor pool, okay, wages will rise. I'm all for higher wages, and I think it can come. I think Trump program is to do that, so I categorically reject that. People and that's one of the reasons on left-wing populism, you're never really going to be able to kind of get your hand on the throttle until you deal with this issue of immigration. You have to deal with them. It's the globalists that want to have American citizens compete with the world, both within our borders and outside. All I'm saying is unfair competition. And so I think on illegal immigration labor is that if you restrict illegal immigration labor coming in here, you're going to have a rise in wages. And that's why I think you're starting to see that right now.
Finally, someone who held a similar job to you, Paul Manafort, is awaiting a verdict. Any views on him? And as we conclude, your views of how you're going to evaluate your performance in the midterms and beyond.
Manafort's, look, they took obviously his attorneys really thought through this idea of not putting on a defense, and so I think they'll let the chips fall where they might. I really haven't followed the case, but I would opine that if defense attorneys decided not to put on a case, they really didn't think the government made a very compelling case. I think we're going to judge it whether we keep the House or not. I mean, I'm all in. Donald Trump's a winner. I mean, Donald Trump is a closer. That's one of the things when I first got on the campaign. Hillary Clinton really never closed the main deal, and Donald Trump's a closer. He closed the primaries, he closed the presidency, and I think when everybody's totally focused on the stakes here on November 6th, that Donald Trump will close. And I think everybody's going to be held accountable of whether we hold the House of Representatives or not. I mean, it's one of the reasons that it's a risky venture, but I feel it has to be done. I'm a big believer in the Trump program, big believer in the president, and I think it really behooves everybody to hold the House of Representatives. So we'll have to see. Steve Bannon, thank you for your time. Thanks for coming by, and I apologize. Got a little hot today here with 100 degrees outside. It's hot in this building. Thank you. Good, sir. Thanks.